on Sunday. There were 6 0-2 teams that got the spark they needed, including my Panthers, to win their first game of the season. What does it mean when we need a spark in our spiritual lives? And how do we get that spark? Let's unpack it. Welcome to the Unpacking It podcast, where we unpack parallels, metaphors, and topics in sports that relate to life and faith. I'm Bryce Johnson in Charlotte, North Carolina, with my producer, Aaron Bennett. We are excited to join you today as we reflect on week 3 in the NFL. A lot of interesting storylines, but today we're going to focus on the 6 teams that went from 0-2 to 1-2, getting their first win of the season. And we appreciate everybody watching on YouTube. Really excited to see the growth there. And then also everybody watching on social media, whether it's Facebook or you see us on Twitter. Man, we're thankful for your support. And LinkedIn as well. And those of you that are loyal listeners to the audio podcast on Spotify and Apple and everywhere else. So appreciate when you subscribe, when you share, when you rate, review, comment, like. Man, we need you. We need your help. So we appreciate that support. You can email me, bryce@unpackingit.com. Always love to hear from you. Want to thank our sponsor, Upward Sports. You see the jersey hanging behind me. And you might ask, hey, what is Upward Sports? Well, they are the world's largest Christian youth sports organization dedicated to partnering with local churches to use sports outreach to reach the community. And so Upward Sports offers basketball, cheerleading, soccer, flag football, volleyball, baseball, and soccer. And soon they will offer Upward Running, which we will tell you more about in the next couple of weeks. And so when you partner with Upward Sports, your church can reach the community, attract young families, and share the gospel with different families in your area. And so schedule a call today, upward.org/unpack, upward.org/unpack. So we appreciate Upward Sports and their support and partnership here at Unpacking It. All right. So we're talking about needing a spark today. And we're going to talk about it from a faith standpoint, but we will start with the NFL. And if you've been listening the last couple of weeks, you know that I was out on Bryce Young, and I was excited about Andy Dalton coming in and leading the charge for the Carolina Panthers. So I am repping my Panthers hat today. I am fired up. They looked night and day. It was a completely different team. And so that's the biggest spark that we got to talk about today. But we will dive into that a little bit more. But just some kind of reactions to week 3. How good are the Buffalo Bills? And what's interesting is coming into the season, my thought on the Bills was, could they be actually like the Panthers from years ago when the Panthers went undefeated with Cam Newton, ended up losing to Atlanta in the regular season. But they had this awesome season. They go to the Super Bowl, lose to the Broncos. But that year, there weren't any elite wide receivers on that team. And I think that's what the Buffalo Bills have this year, to where Josh Allen can just be Josh Allen. He doesn't have to worry about Stephon Diggs, yapping and saying, hey, get me the ball, or any other receiver for that matter. But he can find Shakir. He can find Keon Coleman. He can find Dalton Kincaid. James Cook running the ball well. He missed that big catch, but he had a great game. Even I think Ray Davis scored at the end. So the Bills are fantastic, and I love it that they have, at one point he threw to 10, 11 different guys. That allows them to thrive. So as we sit here today, the Bills are Super Bowl contenders. I was talking to a buddy of mine who's a Bills fan and going into last night's game, and he goes, I don't know if we're a Super Bowl contender. I think they are. The Chiefs are still the team to beat. We know that. They're not playing well. They're still winning. They get all the calls. Things continue to line up well for them, right? So the Chiefs are still the team. But Buffalo's right there. And finally, we see Baltimore. Baltimore gets the win. I'll talk more about them in a little bit. But those are my teams in the AFC that I've still had the most confidence in after 3 weeks. In the NFC, it is absolutely wide open. It is a weird conference. I think there are major concerns for the Eagles, even though they won. I watched a lot of that game, and it was ugly. And they squeaked that one out. I haven't been real high on the Saints, and so they finally woke up, came to life a little bit, or came to reality maybe. And then the team that we have to give some love to, and I talked about it last week, the teams that we're most jealous of, the Packers. Are you kidding me? Malik Willis played even better this week. So to me, the Packers are right there in the NFC as a Super Bowl contender. I mean, how crazy is that? I don't know if we thought that going in. And I've never been this big Matt LaFleur guy, but he is a wonderful coach. I mean, what he's been able to do when Jordan Love is out there and now Malik Willis, they just keep winning. And so I like their young running back, Emmanuel Wilson. I'll be talking about that on the Fantasy Podcast. Make sure you subscribe to that Fantasy Football Fellowship Podcast. But the Packers are right there. And then, Detroit, they're like the Chiefs, where they have not even hit their stride yet they're still winning games. Detroit's 2-1. They're going to be fine. They to me are the team that should represent the NFC this year in the Super Bowl after 3 weeks. That's how I feel. A lot can change, but I think the Eagles are in trouble, and I also think the 49ers are in trouble. The injuries are piling up. The way that they lost that game to the Rams, unacceptable. CMC's looking to figure out what's going on with his Achilles. We're not getting any indication that he's coming back sooner than later. It's definitely on the later side. And I know Jordan Mason's filled in nicely, but I think they're in trouble. And then last night, Monday Night Football, we watched Jacksonville. I mean, that was pathetic. I mean, I watched a couple tough weeks of the Panthers football. That was right up there. I mean, that was awful for Monday Night Football. And I'm disappointed because I thought this team was going to be much better this year. I like Trevor Lawrence. I want him to play well, but he might need to take a breather. I mean, they've lost like eight of their last 9 games going back to last year. They're 0-3. Rough start for the Jags. So, that was interesting. But that was fun to watch. Washington, they're legit. They're a team that's going to be right there, kind of in the mix, maybe in the playoff hunt this year, taking a big step with Jaden Daniels, and the coaching staff they put together really, really solid, brings them, I just think some stability. They're a legit NFL team, a little bit better run these days. So good for them. I mean, I loved Ron Rivera, don't get me wrong, but things toward the end, it was just kind of the ownership change, all that kind of stuff. So now it's cleaned up a little bit, I think, in Washington. My last kind of general thought as we and we'll transition talking about Sparks today, but in the offseason, anytime teams have contract issues or players that are holding out or wondering if they're going to get a deal or not, I'm always concerned about those teams. And through 3 weeks, those teams, the Cowboys, the Bengals, and the 49ers, Brandon Ayuk, CeeDee Lamb, Jamar Chase. I know Chase had an unbelievable game last night, but when you're not all in during training camp and preparing for the season and you hit the ground running, it just raises questions. And so those 3 teams, they have the talent to turn it around, no question. But they've gotten off to such a bad start, and things can quickly unravel. I think especially in Dallas, as we know. You could turn on any other show. I'm sure they're talking about the Cowboys, so I won't do it because everybody else is. But they're in trouble. There's serious concerns there. And then, like I said, with the 49ers, I just think the injuries, Ayuk he's not playing that great. I mean, Juwan Jennings was the star for them, which was unbelievable. Again, we'll talk more about that from a fantasy perspective on the Fantasy Podcast. But those 3 teams, you got to get your guys paid and get them into camp and get them clicking with the quarterbacks. I think that's an issue because CeeDee Lamb's not playing to the level that we've seen him play at. And I got to point to, hey, you got to be there. You got to be locked in. Can't be worried about the contracts. It's a problem. So, all right. Now let's talk about these teams that came into week 3. They were 0-2, and they needed a spark. They needed their offense to start clicking. They needed their defense to really give them a boost. And it was pretty wild. 6 teams got their first win of the season on Sunday. And so we saw the Colts. They beat the Bears in really an ugly game. The Bears actually, they looked okay at times because Rome Odunze played well. Caleb Williams looked a little bit better. They can't really run the ball. But the spark that the Colts got was from Jonathan Taylor. This is who they rely on. He can run the ball. He 110 yards, 2 touchdowns. He gave them the spark they needed. Now, They've got some questions with Anthony Richardson at the quarterback position, and their passing game, not very good. But the spark they needed, Jonathan Taylor. Speaking of running the ball well, we know the Ravens want to run the ball well. And I was not panicking about them after 2 weeks. I thought, hey, they're fine. They're right in the mix. And then they came out and said, hey, we will run all over you, Dallas. Derrick Henry, oh, yeah, he's still got a little bit left in the tank. He was the spark they needed. He ran for 151 yards, 2 touchdowns. The team rushed for 274 yards. This Ravens team, they are going to be tough. I know they, a little bit of a slow start, but they're fine. They lost to the Chiefs and that weird Raiders game. But the Ravens do have this issue where in the fourth quarter they give up leads. So even Dallas made it interesting at the end there. But good for the Ravens. Derrick Henry was their spark that they needed. And now we got to talk more about the Panthers. So I truly believed that Andy Dalton would be the spark that the Panthers needed. And he was. He made everybody look better. Deontay Johnson was incredible. Adam Thielen, even though he got banged up, he had a great game. Chuba Hubbard, he was a great spark as well. But I believe Andy Dalton was the spark that the Panthers needed. And here's the deal. They had to be willing to remove the player that was holding them back. And listen, I feel bad for Bruce Young. It's sad. It's tough. It's painful to watch. But this is football. It's part of the deal. But Andy Dalton is exactly what this Panthers team needed. They need somebody in there to just level things out, stabilize this franchise. And listen, I don't think the Panthers are going to win the rest of their games, but we'll represent them today with the Panthers hat, and we got the football looking good. All right, let's go Panthers. But it's going to be tough to beat the Bengals. Are the Bengals really going to start 0-4? I mean, gosh, that'd be crazy. That's who the Panthers have on Sunday. But Andy Dalton, for the most part, will keep this team competitive. And he's going to maximize the talent around them. And this was driving me nuts the last week or so, where everybody, especially in the national media, was ripping the Panthers, saying that they have no weapons. What are you talking about? Deontay Johnson's been in the league for a number of years and has been very solid for the Pittsburgh Steelers when they at least had somebody throwing him the ball. And even in the midst of some of their quarterback struggles, Deontay Johnson still had some great games. So were you not watching? What were you doing? Deontay Johnson's legit. And we saw that because Andy Dalton was throwing him the ball. Adam Thielen, are you kidding me? This guy's had a great career, consistent. He catches everything that you throw near him, but you got to throw it near him. And so Andy Dalton could do that. And it was cool that Andy Dalton was the first guy this season to throw for 300 yards and 3 touchdowns. So it was an impressive spark, and it was evident. We saw it. The defense played better. And so they win 36-22 against Las Vegas. So big win for them. And then how about the Giants? They get their first win of the season. Let's pump the brakes on them too. I mean, Cleveland's bad, but Daniel Jones looked better. Malik Neighbors is a big-time player. But how about their defense? The Giants' defense, 8 sacks, 2 forced fumbles, and Deshaun Watson, oh boy, yikes. It is concerning for them there. Jameis Winston needs to get a look there. I mean, we're seeing some situations around the NFL where the backup is looking like the answer, or at least you got to mix it up. So you need that spark. So Cleveland's going to need that spark because they don't have it. They got no spark there. Joe Flacco was that spark they needed last year. But for the Giants, it was the defense. They really gave them the spark and set them up well. I mean, 8 sacks, 2 fumbles. That's a good day for the defense. And then how about the Broncos? The Broncos got to win, and here was the spark for them. Bo Nix on the ground. So, they've gotten off to a little bit of a rough start, not much in the passing game. The passing game was better, but it opened things up when he ran the ball, rushed for 47 yards, got into the end zone, and they dominated the Bucs, 26-7. Very impressive performance for Denver. I'm intrigued by Bo Nix. I want to see if he's got it. Can Sean Payton really get the most out of him? Can he live up to that what I thought was an early draft pick for him? But man, the Bucs were 2-0. So that was a big win for the Broncos to get their first win of the season. And then how about the Rams? A lot of injuries to receivers, just kind of across the board. But their running back, Kyron Williams, he was the spark they needed, and he ignited the offense, finished the day with 3 touchdowns. They were down 14-24 midway through the fourth quarter. Big comeback for them. Stafford gets some credit for being the spark as well. but Kyron Williams was the key there for sure. So 6 teams start 0-2, and there they were heading into week 3 going, all right, what are we doing? What's going on? Why are we losing? They're trying to figure things out. Like, why aren't we clicking? And they finally got the spark they needed, whether it was from the offense, defense, combination of both. And so the parallel for us today, here at Unpacking It, man, we like to look at the parallel from sports to life and faith. And here's the deal. Many of us today, or we can relate to this experience, we're struggling spiritually. We're struggling in our walk with Jesus, and we've just hit sort of a rough patch, whether it's circumstantial, whether it's kind of been building, but we feel like we're 0-2, right? We can kind of relate to these teams that were 0-2, needing a spark, that maybe our faith seems stagnant. Just like, man, we're not really growing, things aren't really clicking, and we're looking for answers. We're trying to figure out, like, all right, I gotta mix things up. Something's got to change here, and so we desire a win, right? But more importantly, what we desire is a vibrant relationship with Jesus. That's what we long for. That's what our soul longs for, and we desire to experience God's presence. And we just want to know that he's like, we know he's with us, but we just want to know it, right? You know the difference. You believe it in your mind, but you hit these times where it's just like, oh, man, is God still there? Is he still love me? And we start questioning a little bit, and so we need that spark again. And so we desire to hear his voice. We're just like, man, I'm not hearing God. I'm confused, and I'm lacking the clarity that I need. And so maybe some of these words kind of identify what we're going through as well. Maybe we feel, like we've been distracted, discouraged, depleted, and again, we're desperate for a win. So we're 0-2. So what do we do? And here personally, I can relate to this. Recently, I've been in a little bit of a funk, and for me, it comes down to busyness. August and September even include October for that matter. It's like the craziest stretch for me in every part of my life. It is family. It is other activities, personal family activities, just a lot going on. Birthdays, anniversaries, everything's going on. And then here at Unpacking It, it's football season. So we're running Fantasy Football Fellowship. We're, getting into 50 churches around the country. We've got our golf tournament that's coming up in October. And so I can make all these excuses. But I've been a little depleted. I've been wearing thin. I feel like I've been in overdrive. Like my mind just is going. And I'm thinking about all these things that have to get done. And all these tasks. And, oh, man, I'm feeling the pressure. And we've got to, make sure this gets done. And we've got to raise money so that we can keep the ministry going. And then I go home and we got the soccer game and, for Maddie. And so all this is going on. And so here I am feeling distracted, depleted, needing a spark, wanting to have that vibrant relationship with the Lord and ignite the passion again and get a win and hear God's voice. And so some of the things we have to consider, and I'm evaluating this in my own life, is, all right, what replenishes me? So if I feel depleted, I need to be replenished, okay? And so there are some things that, each of us are replenished by. It gets us going. It gives us that spark, especially from a spiritual standpoint. So what is that for you? And how can we pull away? How can we get away and get some time, alone with God? We've got to do it. We've got to make that happen. And the other part of that, though, is sometimes when we feel distant from God and we feel like, man, things aren't clicking, we keep drifting. We keep pulling away. So instead of pulling away from God, we need to pull away with God. And I think that's key, because it's so easy to just keep kind of going down that path of busyness or distraction or discouragement. We've got to get away from the craziness of life, be still with God, be alone with God, fellowship and enjoy him. And all of a sudden, as we are in his presence and aware of his presence within us as followers of Jesus, oh man, our faith gets ignited again. It gets ignited again. And then the other thing we have to consider is, okay, what is taking priority? The Bible talks about idols. What are we valuing more than God in our life? And if I'm honest, lately I've been thinking more about fantasy football almost than anything else. I've been a little obsessed with fantasy football. It's like, man, I got 5 teams I'm keeping up with. It's a lot. But I got to take a second and go, whoa, what am I doing? Is fantasy football becoming more of a priority? Is it becoming an idol in my life? Do I care more about whether or not my fantasy team wins and who I'm going to pick up on the waiver wire than being with God, enjoying God, spending time with God? So maybe you can relate whatever that is in your life. And then we have to eliminate the distractions. It's kind of a similar thing, but what's distracting us? Things that really aren't important that are stealing our attention and our focus, and we've got to keep our eyes, fixed on Jesus. We got to realign our heart and mind and our eyes, what we're thinking about, what we're focused on. And then also when we feel discouraged and, man, I'm 0-2, I'm struggling, we've got to surround ourselves with people that are encouragers. Who is that in your life that will build you up? Because if we're feeling depleted, it's tough to be around maybe people that deplete us. Maybe we're the encouragers for them, but that's fine, and that's important too. But if we're in this spot of, I'm 0-2, man, I'm struggling, we got to surround ourselves with some people that are going to encourage us, point us in the right direction, and give us that spark that we need. Like they might be that spark to get things going for us in our lives. And so as we parallel this back to the NFL, the other thing that we have to do, just like the Panthers, we have to be willing to make the change. We have to be willing to remove whatever is holding us back. And so maybe that is sin in our life. Like, and for the most part, I'm sure that factors into this too, especially when it's idols and all that is sin and selfishness and pride. And so we've got to remove all of that. And so Hebrews 12:1 tells us, let us strip off every weight that slows us down, especially the sin that so easily trips us up, and let us run with endurance the race God has set before us. And so we got to get back on this journey, back on this race, with God, not hanging on to these things that are dragging us down, that are depleting us, discouraging us, that are stealing our focus, stealing our attention, and we gotta replace them. We gotta bench them. we did a whole podcast about that last year, about benching whatever in our life needs to be benched. But what needs to be replaced? What needs to be replaced? The Panthers knew that they needed to replace Bruce Young and bring in Andy Dalton for the spark. And it worked, thankfully. So we're celebrating that. And so what is that in our own lives that we need to remove? And let's begin with ourselves. In what ways do I need to remove myself, my selfishness, my pride, and hand the ball off, right? Hand the ball off to Jesus, so to speak, and let him take over. Just like, the Ravens handed the ball off to Derrick Henry. The Colts handed the ball off to Jonathan Taylor and got the spark they needed. Whatever we're hanging on to, and the selfishness and the pride and whatever it is, we got to hand that off. All right, Jesus, take it. You got to take away my selfishness. You need to take over in my life. I'm following you. Ultimately, you're the spark that I need. And then the other part of this too is, we need a boost from our defense. And in today's context, we could go a lot of different directions with this, but you know what I think helps us from a defense standpoint, parallel? Worship and gratitude. How do we fight against being complacent in our faith, jaded in our faith, distant, drained? It's worship and gratitude. When we get to, a posture of acknowledging God for who he is, and fearing God with awe-filled worship and wonder and reverence, and giving him all the glory and honor in our life, that's when all of a sudden that discouragement is lifted. And some of our complacency. It's easy just to go through the motions in life, and even in our faith, we just go through the motions, and maybe we read a short devotional, or let me read a couple verses here, and we just do it to check it off, and we show up to church and we're not really engaged. But when we live a worship-filled life, when our life is worship, where everything we're doing is like, all right, man, how can I honor God in what I'm doing and bring him glory in everything that I do, and point to him and acknowledge his character and his goodness and his faithfulness and his magnificent power. Like, we need to do that. And it changes our perspective, because then now our eyes get off of fantasy football to the extent that it, we got to leave that behind and go, man, I want to serve the God of the universe who loves me and has changed me and saved me. That's who I need to worship today. That's who I need to focus on. That's who I need to pursue and seek. And so if we're looking for that spark, let's think about our defense. And again, that the defense can be worship and gratitude. And you know what gratitude is? Being thankful. Thankful for everything we got. It's so easy to feel depleted and bogged down. It's like, oh, this isn't happening, or, oh, I got to do this. And we go down that negative path versus being filled with gratitude and thanksgiving and allowing that to help us move past the complacency and the jadedness, if that's a word. And so the other thing is, as we long for this spark today and we want to thrive in our lives, especially, spiritually speaking, here's an encouraging verse found in James 4:8. Come close to God with a contrite heart, and he will come close to you. And so let's draw near to him. Draw near to God. In Psalm 145:18, it says, the Lord is close to all who call on him. Yes, to all who call on him in truth. And so let's call on him. Let's draw near. Let's come close to God. He's right there with us. But we've got to acknowledge that, and we've got to be still and divert our attention to him and to listen. And so how do we get the spark? What is the spark? We turn to him. We draw ourselves to him. And so we've got to stop. So often I just feel distant. I feel distant. Okay, stop. Sit down and just go be with the Lord. And so we have to do that. And so I hope that's encouraging to you. Psalm 23:3 declares, he restores my soul. He leads me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. And so he's the one who restores our soul. That's what we long for. When we feel like we're 0-2 and we're discouraged and depleted, he's the one who restores my soul. And so as followers of Jesus, we know that Jesus is the light. He is the spark. He is the one who makes things click. We feel like, oh man, life's just not clicking right now. No, he's the one that makes them click. So we got to turn to him. And so any lasting change that we desire starts with him. And so, maybe some of these teams that made a change in week 3, that spark is going to lead to ongoing change the rest of the season. If the Panthers keep Andy Dalton out there, that maybe their whole season changes. And it may or may not. That's the NFL. Football is that way. But in life, Jesus changes everything. And so a turnaround is possible. We get back on the right track with him. And if it's for the first time, he's the spark you're looking for. He's the one that changes everything. It's lasting change. But we have to continue to pursue him and seek him and be with him. And so let's turn to him. Let's look to him. Let's rest in him. Right? We got to slow down. We got to slow our mind down. We got to slow down our activity and reset, realign. Here are the words of David. This is what he sings to the Lord in Psalm 18:28. You light a lamp for me. The Lord my God lights up my darkness. So we're talking about a spark. We're talking about igniting. He is the light. He's the one that shows us the way. And so when we feel like we're in the dark, it's confusing. What are we doing? Why aren't things clicking? He's the light. So let's turn to him. And then let's see, the two other things to consider as we wrap things up today. We've got to get into God's word. So we spend time with him, and by doing that too, we are in his word. And we ask him to spark our understanding, help us to see scripture in a clear way. And I like the prayer, Lord, illuminate the scripture, help it to come to life so that it clicks and it's clear. And so Psalm 19:7 says, the law of the Lord is perfect, flawless, restoring and refreshing the soul. The statutes of the Lord are reliable and trustworthy, making wise the simple. And so then Psalm 119:18, open my eyes to spiritual truth so that I may behold wonderful things from your law. And so he's the one who opens our eyes. He's the one who leads and guides, restores, refreshes. He's the spark that we need. And so do we want to spark in our faith? We go back to him, right? And so through worship, gratitude, let's be around people that encourage us, the fellowship with those kind of people. And we can go from 0-2 and we get one win, right? You take one step and you get back on track with one win that then leads to another win. And so if if it's been a few weeks or months that you haven't been spending time with the Lord and you're going, man, I'm just depleted, I'm distant from the Lord, it's not working, things aren't going well. Hey, start today. Start today. Go to God in prayer. Go to God in his word. Turn to him. Ask him to be the spark and to get that faith ignited. We're looking for that spiritual spark. Let's experience him and experience the spark that we're looking for today. So let's be encouraged by the 6 teams that won. Things were a little dark and bleak for those 0-2 teams. People thought the season was over for the Panthers. They're a disaster. Jimmy Johnson and Terry Bradshaw on Sunday morning on Fox. I used to like those guys, but man, they were ripping on my Panthers. Come on, guys, you blew it. You thought everything was over, but the Panthers found some light. And so for us, no matter how bleak it might be today, no matter how bad that 0-2 start feels, there's hope. There is hope. There's hope for a spark, and so praise God for that. So I hope that is encouraging for you today. Really appreciate you listening. And those 0-3 teams, the Jags, the Bengals, and the Titans, they need that spark next week. So we'll see if they can get it. Hopefully the Bengals not against the Panthers, though. That's the thing. I don't want that. But Aaron is a Seahawks fan, my producer. Seahawks are looking good. I'd throw them in the mix too. Detroit, Green Bay, and Seattle. Those are my teams right now as far as who I expect to make it to the Super Bowl. One of those 3 teams. And then in the AFC, you got your Chiefs, your Bills, your Ravens, which is kind of expected. But I'm writing off the Eagles and the Niners. At this point, I don't have any confidence in those teams. And don't give me the Vikings yet. I'm not buying in just yet. I can't do it. I good for Sam Darnold. I still can't do it. But anyway, hope you had fun today. Thanks for being with me. The next couple of weeks, we're looking to have some co-hosts back in the studio. But thanks for letting me share my heart today. This was personal for me today. This is a personal topic. Sometimes I write devotionals that God is very clearly, directly speaking to me, and this was one of them in a profound way. So this is the one that I did this week to be able to share with you. So thank you. Thanks for listening. I hope it was encouraging to you. For Aaron, I'm Bryce. I'm a sports fan who follows Jesus. I believe in the good news that he died on the cross for my sin. He was resurrected, and through faith, I've been saved by his grace. I hope that is true for you as well, and I hope you'll join me as we live life as sports fans who follow Jesus together. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll talk to you next time right here on the Unpacking It podcast.